I'm being recorded too, aren't I? Well, my name is Linc. I am a grateful recovered addict and a grateful member of Cocaine Anonymous. Yeah, I feel like a child. When I think about my past, I think about fear. And I think about how I was afraid of everything I ever was part of or touched my entire life. And it's funny, this brought me back, having to come up here and speak brought me back to a time I was embarrassed in class in grade 3. That's where it took me for a few moments, right? But this is so surreal to me. This is my home. And I'm not talking about Calgary, I mean Cocaine Anonymous. This is my home. This is something that my entire life I never imagined I could be part of or have in my life. And there's not words that can describe it enough. It's just absolutely amazing, the people that are in my life and the things I get to be part of and the things I get to do. Okay? I actually have a few gifts. It's kind of cool. Speaking's not one. Sorry about that. So, you know, as a kid, my first memories are wanting to fit in. I mean, no matter how many times I look back, my parents were excommunicated out of a church, and I had problems with God and people from as young as I can remember. And so all of my family outside of my parents turned their backs on my parents, and nobody helped them, and they did the best. I know today they did the best we could. But I went to public school with homemade clothes that, well, they didn't fit. You know, I've been tall for a long time. And I think today that the children and the schools and the stuff that I was part of, I think it's just something that most kids go through. But at the time, I didn't feel like it, right? I never felt like I was part of. I didn't feel like I was good enough. And then, you know, it was always compounded when my relatives would come over, because they'd pull me aside and tell me how bad my parents were for being kicked out of the church, and that if I didn't follow what they were doing or get back on the boat, that, you know, it was going to be a really bad outcome for me. And as a kid, I was told not the good things that God could bring to my life. I was told about, if I didn't do what they said, I was told the horror stories. And I had night terrors for years, man. I slept at the end of my parents' bed till I was 12 years old, because I would wake up in like vivid hallucinations almost, and I hadn't even tried LSD yet, you know. And I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of people and everything, and because I always had that feeling of not being good enough. So even in school, you know, and I remember being in class and asking, you know, it's my turn to stand up and talk about the poem I wrote or something, and I had every excuse in the book already. I was a good manipulator, man. I found my way out. I passed out a couple of times in front of the class, and out I went, you know. And I was told that I was a fake and that I wouldn't amount to stuff, and I just came to believe that, you know. And then, you know, I had my first interaction with girls in grade 3. You know, I got that little note, the one that gets passed around the class that says, "Do you like me? Check yes or no." And I actually kind of did like that one girl, so I checked yes. And then halfway through the class, the teacher left to do something, and she got up in front of the class and ridiculed me and made fun of me. The whole thing was a joke. And so I just became it just seemed like everything that happened made me more afraid of people and women. And I was thinking about all my relationships today. And I started laughing because I realized that I had never asked a woman out till I was 35 years old. I never asked a woman out till I was 35 years old. I settled for whoever asked me. That's what I did, because I was afraid. And I never thought that I would amount to anything. And so I was searching for power, really, right? I was searching for something to feel better about myself, something to take me out of that. And so, first of all, I found metal. Music to all life. I think I wrote a little poem about it that stands for music essential to all life. But I joined a group of outsider kids in schools, and you know, the ones that smoke cigarettes half in the door with the door open and were really cool, and never did any school work and all that shit. Yeah, I became part of that group, and I got a little bit of power from that. It gave me strength. I felt like I fit in somewhere, something, a little bit. And a couple of years went past. I think I was in grade 7, and this couple of guys asked me if I wanted to go hang out at the park and have a few drinks. And I was talking all tough, like I knew exactly what that was like. You know, I'd been hammered 100 times, and I'd never had a drink before. But so we get to the park, and this guy pulls out a flat of beer. I don't know if anybody's had that shit. And I didn't know what to expect, right? I had a couple of drinks. I chugged them back like they were glasses of water. I think I got to about number 6, and then it hit me, right? I smiled immediately. Immediately found the cure to all my fucking problems that second. I felt strong. I felt like I fit in. I felt powerful. I projectile vomited onto 3 fucking people. And I immediately asked for another one, right? And it was out of control after that. Every moment I got, I found, you know, I had no idea what I was in for. You know, I was at a friend's house a couple of weeks after that, actually, and I was talking big again, like, you know, I had got drunk once, but I talked like I was the master of alcohol and trying to be cool and fit in with this guy. And he goes, well, come to my place, I got some stuff. And so I go over to his house, and I think I was about 13 years old, and he pulls out a bottle of vodka and some Tang mix. And I'm waiting for him to mix the Tang, but he just poured the Tang mix right into the vodka and poured a couple of tall glasses, right? Now, I can only go by what I know, and what I know is, I know what the beer did, so it's got to be just like the beer, right? And it was about 28, 30 degrees Celsius that day, and I sucked that thing back, and he's like, oh, my mom's coming home, you got to go. So now, we're in an apartment building, kitty corner to my house. Like, I just had to cross the street 2 ways, and I'm on my front lawn. I came down the street, I got to the first one, and I went to cross again, and I collapsed and passed out in the middle of the street. I don't know how I got home. Somebody picked me up off the street in the middle of traffic, in the middle of rush hour, and dragged me home. And I just remember my parents above my bed looking at me with this horrific look, right? And for the first time in my life, my dad didn't yell at me, because he was fucking speechless. He didn't know what to say. You know, he was so angry that he hid for a while and didn't talk to me, and my head was pounding and whatever, and man, the moment my head could think again, I thought, that's the best shit I've ever had. I just want to fucking go do that again. The consequences eluded me. I thought about nothing else. And so every party I could be at, I didn't have a lot of money. I stole money from my parents, from other people. I even blackmailed my principal out of $50. And my principal in my school was drinking on the job, and I saw the bottle of Jack Daniels in his drawer. I told him I was going to rat him out if he didn't give me $50, and he paid up. I thought for sure I was going to get expelled. And it turned out good for me. So I thought. I'd get drunk, and I'd get powerful. And I'd talk big, and I'd get into scraps, and I'd mouth people off. And then I'd run into them sober when I was a coward and get my ass kicked. There was always somebody looking for me, and there was always some of my friends coming back bleeding, telling me that they got what they got because of something I said. And even though I was drinking, and when I was drunk I felt good, I already was feeling consequences of what that kind of life was bringing, and I didn't, nothing felt right, and I just thought that the answer was more. And when I got old enough, when I was 16, I quit school, and I went to work with my dad, which was horrible because when I was hungover, I hated him in the first place, and then to be working with him hungover, and I stole his truck a couple of times. I abandoned him in Canmore. We were working together, and he told me that I wasn't doing a good enough job, and I wasn't. I was hungover and making a mess of things, and so I got in his truck and drove back to Calgary and left him there. And you know, looking back, my parents still always allowed me back in their house. I fucking wouldn't have. You know, they put up with a lot. I'd steal my dad's, or I'd go take my dad's work truck after work and go get hammered somewhere, and he'd call me, tell me he needed the truck back for work in the morning, and I'd come back and I'd sneak in the house and steal the keys to my mom's car and go, right? Driving drunk all the time, and I was never in an accident or injured anybody ever when I can't figure it out. Guy upstairs must have been looking out for me, but alcohol was something I needed to exist. I couldn't do anything without it. I couldn't talk to people. I couldn't fit in. I couldn't be human. I just didn't think there was another way for me. It was just normal to do the things I did, and so I carried on like that. And my best friend at the time, who drank with me all the time when I was 18 years old, he called me one day, and I really liked his girlfriend. I liked her quite a bit. And he gets on the phone with me and says, I'm going to have my way with her one more time, and then I'm going to dump her. And for some reason, I didn't think that was right, and even though he was my best friend, so I had a few drinks and thought about it, and then my mouth ran off, and I called her and told her what he was going to do, and a couple of weeks later, in the end, we got drunk, and she asked me out, and because she was so happy that I was honest with her. My intentions weren't quite that nice, and but we did end up having 2 kids, and I got married. We got married, and the funny thing is, and I'll never forget this, I moved in and out of the house because every time my alcoholism got out of control, I'd be asked to leave, or I'd go, somewhere else, or I'd go to treatment, and for other people, for other reasons, I'd come back, tell them I was fixed with intentions of drinking again, and all she ever talked about, like most people, they want that perfect day, they want a wedding, they want to get married, they want, that life. And interesting. Anyway, so I had this idea, one of my first brilliant ideas, that if I asked her to marry me, she'd stop bugging me about my drinking. So I did, and it worked for about 3 months. And and then I was back living at her mom's place in the basement again, and I started drinking a lot because I couldn't deal with anything. At the time, I don't know how, I became a drywaller along the way for the same reasons, was looking for power. It was the most badass job out there. It was the toughest thing that I could find, and I wanted to be tougher than everybody else. I wanted to be something, right? And so I became a drywaller, and I don't know how I was capable of drinking and working so hard for so many years, but I did, and I found myself having DTs, not being able to make it through the whole night without drinking, blacking out almost every time I was drinking. I woke up in a different city a few times. I woke up in a hotel one time, and I looked around, and I didn't know where I was, and I couldn't remember my name. I couldn't remember my own name, and that scared the shit out of me. I absolutely could not remember my name. And so I went to the closest bar I could find and had a couple of drinks, and it kind of brought my memory back, and I started thinking a little bit. And I fucking realized I was in the bar I drank in every day. And that I had just passed out on the steps, and somebody put me in a hotel across the street, I'd spent the last 10 or 12 years drinking here, and I didn't know where I was. That's what alcohol was doing to me. And I didn't know what to do with myself. I'd be waking up, I'd be sitting outside the liquor store, and I'd have a few drinks and go to work for a while, or I'd skip jobs and get fired. And There was days where I'd drink until I passed out. I'd drink all day. I didn't never eat and just not know where I was and be ashamed and have to ask for help to get home after I'd spent all my money and time again. I made my wife sick. I made her sick. She lived right next to her sister. And if I called across the city to get a ride in the middle of the night, she wouldn't wake up her sister to watch the kids because she didn't want the rest of her family to know how bad I was. Right? She'd wake the kids up and bring them along to the bar to get me in. Yeah. Everything was blurry. My life sucked. I started having thoughts about suicide. I just didn't want to be anymore, but I didn't know how to live without alcohol. And so one day, I had drinking with one of the guys I drank with at the pub all the time, went to his place, and I don't know if anybody else has been there when you got about 10 minutes maybe, and you're just going to fall down and crash wherever you're standing. So you're looking for something soft. And he pushes the CD across the counter and says, this'll perk you up. And just before I reached out to grab it, and I had no idea what it was. I didn't know what cocaine was. I had seen it on TV, but still didn't understand it. I had no idea, nothing, not stories. There was nothing in my body that understood it. Before I grabbed it, he pulled it back and said, but I want you to hear this. I want you to understand that you can never fucking hold me responsible for what this is going to do. Yeah, I said, you're a fucking idiot. What are you talking about? Give me that shit. Because I was looking for anything else to feel different than the alcohol was making me feel. And within about 20 seconds, it was back. I could drink like I used to, longer. Sleep wasn't quite as necessary. And it was crazy. But the thing was, I didn't make enough money to support that habit. So I had to start doing some other things on the side. And stealing. I hurt a lot of people along the way. There's an amend that I tried to make, and the guy won't talk to me today, but I worked for a guy long enough that he trusted me, and I did it on purpose. I manipulated him, that I billed for a whole big job that I was going to do before I started it. I conned him into paying me first, and then I left Calgary. And that's the kind of stuff I did. As a drywaller, there's only 150 companies in Calgary. I could go around from each one. By the time I got back to the first guy, they fucking forgot who I was. It was great, as far as getting away with what I was doing. And it was the same old shit all the time. And man, I coming off of that shit, my thoughts weren't good, and I'd go home with crying, tears in my eyes and tail between my legs. And I'll never do this again, man. I swear to God, I'll never fucking do this again. Just help me, please. And then about 3 hours later, I was planning my next fix, right? That's how it always was for me. I'd obsess, and the disease would take me back again. And anyway, again, I was looking for something different. So I tried a few things. I tried heroin. I didn't like that very much. I actually believed that I didn't like the people that were doing it. I didn't like the clientele. I didn't want to hang out with those guys, but smoking crack with the other guys was okay. And wow, I hadn't smoked crack yet. And that's the thing. I went to the regular guy I went to, and he said, I'm all out of the stuff you want, so try this. And I quit drinking that day. I quit drinking that day, dude. Rarely did I drink after that, because I found something new. First 6 months I lived in my van. Had no idea where I was or what the hell I was doing. All the fears that I had ever had in my life were tenfold. I was afraid of everything twice as much. I had people I'd give free stuff to in my van because they'd get out and get my cigarettes and gas, because I couldn't get out of my van. I remember it felt like my body was broken when I finally peeled myself out of the driver's seat, and it was just, I was lost. I was lost in And it was the only thing that existed for me. I somehow had found a way to put my family and everything that had ever meant anything at all in my life aside, and bad things started to happen. I couldn't stop, and bad things started to happen. You know, I woke up one morning in somebody's bed by myself. There was nobody else in the house, and I thought I'd pissed myself, but I was sleeping in a puddle of my own blood. I had bled out half of what was inside me. I shouldn't have been alive. Now, your average person would probably call an ambulance or something. Right? The only first thought I had was, how do I hide this? How do I get rid of this? How do I fucking get more dope? And I went back out that night, and it was just the beginning of how bad it got. You know, the people that I was hanging around, the places I was going, I would black out on coke and come to in somebody's house. And the last time I did that, I came to, and this guy was talking to me, and he's like, dude, I'll give you whatever you want, just get rid of these. Get rid of these. I'm like, I can't even see them. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I cleared up for a minute, and he's like, I got these bags of clothes, man. I need you to get fucking rid of them. I'm like, what bags? And I looked around, and the fucking walls were red, man. There was blood and skin and hair all over the fucking place. And how did I get here? What brought me to this point? You know, like, this is, I had to go through a couple of doors and bend some pipes and do some crazy shit to get out of that fucking house. And on the way out the door at the end of the driveway, there was two guys out tweaking in the fucking, right in the middle of the pavement in rush hour traffic, and the cops were chasing them down the fucking street. And I thought I was in a cartoon, man. Like, what's going on? This can't be real. Like, I just didn't understand it. And so I called a friend, and I said, you know, I need some help, and I went to detox. 48 hours later, I was feeling better and said, I don't know how that happened. That won't happen again, but I'll just get dope from somebody else. It'll all be good. And you know, that it just kept happening again and again, and it was worse every time. There was always some dumb shit. You know, there's a couple of things that I can't even really share up here that happened, and one of the drawing points for me was I had nothing left, and I was coming down, and there was a girl running around with a 12 gauge. You know, it was just kind of like a glimmer in my eye that she'd be hiding in the closet and ran across the living room. She had loaded double barrel 12 gauge. And she came out, stuck it in my face all of a sudden, and said, I know you were sleeping with my daughter. I'm gonna fucking blow your head off right now, she says. And you know what? I smiled and said, either get me some more of that dope you're smoking, or pull the trigger, because I don't like this in-between shit. And she started laughing and put the gun down. In fact, the dealer came in, took the gun apart, and put it in his trunk. And that's not normal behavior. People don't, that's not party behavior. It's not hang out at the pub and have a few drinks behavior, but that's the shit that was going on in my life all the time. I started to see people from meetings I'd randomly be up. They'd show up at the fucking door and say, man, we'll clean everybody out for you. We'll help you out here. Let's go. And, I couldn't honestly stand in front of them and say yes. I still wasn't done with all of that happening. And you know, the last time I used, it wasn't those things. It wasn't those things that stopped me. It was that I put enough coke in me to kill about 10 people, and I was still fucking sober. And I could still feel. I was raw, and I could see all the things in my life that I didn't like about myself, and I could feel every bad thing I'd ever done. The cocaine didn't work anymore. It didn't do what I wanted it to do. And that scared me, because I knew my choices after that were suicide, and that was it. What else am I gonna do? There's nothing else, man. I gotta pump something else in like that. It's gonna kill me anyway. So I called my buddy, and he came and picked me up, and I don't remember a lot of the trip to detox, but I remember telling him that I was too afraid to kill myself. That's where I was. I had nothing left. it burnt all my bridges. My parents and other people I cared about refused to take me to treatment or detox. I had burnt them so many times. They were afraid if I got in their car, I was going to steal the lint off the seat, man. Anything my hand would touch was going with me, right? Just in case for the next time. Part of me getting to that point, though, was going in and out of rooms. People told me I should, along the treatment, they told me to go to AA. I went to AA, I didn't like it. It's a bunch of old guys that I couldn't relate to. I started hanging out there after a while, though, because they couldn't see the real me and I could hide there. I went to CA a few times and I didn't like it. But I hung out there to make my family and other people happy. Now, the problem I had was really fucking bad sponsorship and people that didn't carry any fucking message. And I never caught that until one of my sponsors, the only good thing he ever fucking told me was, you should be listening to speakers and listening to other people and get some outside view of what's going on, because I did nothing but bitch to him about what everybody else was doing, right? And somehow I got to listen to Chris R. And I got to hear him talk about being sober for 7 years or however long it was, with no solution in his life. And I caught it, man. In Lethbridge, the two main people that were doing all the footwork for CA were using the fucking pager to make dope deals. And I know that because on one of my relapses, I called my buddy and the fucking guy chairing the meeting showed up to give me dope. And I just didn't get it. This is not what fucking, there's nothing here for me. Like how am I, there's nothing. But I also wasn't willing to really listen either. And so on my last trip to detox, when it hurt that bad, and it took me a few days to really realize where I was at, for it to sink in, when I was okay enough to make a phone call. I was talking about it earlier. I think I had been up for about 14 days maybe, and that feeling of eating my first food and a piece of toast felt like fucking sandpaper going down the back of my cracked throat. I don't know if anybody else has ever had that happen. Water hurt, But I tried one more time because I only had the two thoughts in my head. I was still afraid to do what I needed to do to end my life. And so I found somebody, and I knew what I used to always do was just feed everybody bullshit and start talking. But this time around, some nasty things had happened, and I found the closest person I could find that I thought had done some work, that understood, and that could help me. And I started talking, man. As soon as I could open my mouth, I started getting shit off my chest that was gonna get me high again in 2 days if I didn't fucking do it. And it scared the shit out of me. But finally that pain had outweighed the fear. And I just shut up. I stopped talking. And I took seriously what I was being told, and I did the work. I still had a bunch of issues, especially with sponsorship. Sponsors aren't fucking guidance counselors. My sponsor, I don't think had ever been in a relationship in that person's life and was giving me marriage advice and telling me what I need to do with my kids. Those weren't the things I needed to stay sober. I needed some solution, and I needed somebody to open the fucking big book and show me how this worked, show me what my disease was, and so I could understand it. Because I was more lost in sobriety than I was using, because I didn't know what fucking direction I was going or what I was supposed to be doing. And the only thing I could see was that I was gonna die if I didn't do something. And so I made the decision to not care. I made the decision to not worry about what anybody thought. And I told somebody all my shit. I did the steps, and I told everybody, I told that person, and when I did my 5, everything that had ever happened in my fucking life. And I just started talking, and I don't think it was the right way to do things, but if I hadn't done what I did that day, that I wouldn't be here. So it was a beginning. And along the way, I found out that I wasn't happy in sobriety because I'd missed a lot. My life sucked. I thought about using lots again, but I was scared. I didn't want to go back to that, so I was an asshole, you know, just like one of the times my ex-wife she actually came home with a case of beer one time and said, "You're better drunk. Just fucking get back to doing what you're doing, because you're an asshole sober. You treat me like shit. At least you pretended to be sweet when you were drunk." And even though I'd, you know, go missing for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. But the problem the whole time was me. I was afraid of my own fucking shadow and everything in it. Before I came up here, I was upstairs talking to my sponsor, and I was terrified of being up here. Made me think about being a kid again and standing in front of those fucking kids, you know. And had a little chat with my sponsor. First thing he says always is, "Oh yeah, and where's your God in that shit?" And then he laughs at me, right? Sorry, I won't be there to mock you. But he said, "This is an opportunity. Do you think that before it would have been possible to do this? Do you think if you hadn't done the steps and done the work and got God in your life that you'd be able to do that? Do you think you'd be able to do anything without that?" And the answer is absolutely no, because the only way I get through any fear I've ever had is with my higher power. It's the only thing that I know. And I think about how scared I was my whole life, and I think about how I don't ever want anybody else to go through the stuff I did. Also, I'm really grateful that I went through all that stuff, because I wouldn't be here or who I am today without it. But I tried everything else, man. I tried every other program out there. I talked to counselors, I did everything else, but nothing else worked for me, because my disease was spiritual. That empty inside power I was looking for, I couldn't find anywhere else but here. And they didn't like me talking about being an addict at the other fellowship, so eventually I call this my home. And I still run into people from that fellowship, and they think I'm out using, because I haven't been there in a while. Yeah, well, I'm a little busy, sorry buddy. But this is my home, and the people in it, the God things that happened in my life, and me and my sponsor call this God dope. It's the best dope out there. Could not happen without going through the things I had and doing the steps, getting a sponsor and doing the work, and relying on my higher power. The stuff just wouldn't happen, and it's just mind-blowing some days. When I get out of the way and I stop and listen, I shit my pants, because stuff happens that just amazes me, you know. My parents went from not letting me in their car to coming to a couple of my birthday celebrations. And after not having a drink for 29 years, my dad fucking admitted to being an addict. It's part of another fellowship. And they watched me change my life and want to change theirs. I got nothing, man. I didn't go through 1/10 of what my dad went through as a kid. It ain't mine. I didn't do it. The man upstairs gave me what I have, and he gets the credit for everything. You know, I'm so grateful that I got to be part of this. I'm grateful that this committee brought this convention to life, that I'm part of the Lethbridge district, and that I get to be part of Cocaine Anonymous, because it's fucking awesome. There are no better words to describe this shit. You know, if you don't believe me, come camping with me. You know, or piss me off. I'll get you a sponsor. I've been blessed with all the people that have been put in my life, you know. I didn't do nothing for Chris. God put him in my path when I needed help. And that's how it works, right? And the two things that I've figured out is that I'm not a scientist. I never fucking tested any drugs. I did them all. You know, I don't go out and, what's the word for that? I don't go and do, I don't dig or Experiment, yeah. I don't know what that word means. I never experimented shit. I just did it all, you know. And the other thing is, I don't need to understand why I'm an addict or how I got here, but that I am. And this is who I am today, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for everybody that's here in my life. And I know where the answers are, and anybody that's looking for it can find it here, you know. I love all you guys. Thanks for welcoming me, taking me in, and bringing me home. Thanks.